Hi, Kevin Greene here. Welcome to Pathways to the Past. Well, it's springtime in the boulevards. The trees are getting leaves on them. Flowers are blooming. And I've got a Kovener's Corner ice cream cone. So that's going to be the subject of this video. Not the trees or the flowers, but the Kovener's Corner. We're going to look into the almost 100-year-old history of that little building on the corner and dive into it. But first I need to finish this ice cream cone. So I'll see you in a bit. Kovener's Corner. The Kovener family have been serving up ice cream from this little building on the corner of 2nd Street and Emerson Drive since 1949. But the history of this building goes back even further than that, so that's what I'm going to tell you about today. So the story of Kovener's Corner starts with a fellow named Benjamin Shannon. He was born in 1865 on a farm up near Redington, Indiana, where he grew up. He became a farmer himself. He held other jobs through his years as well. He was, for years and years, was the Reading Township trustee. In August of 1894, he married Grace Gilbert from the same area, and they had some children, particularly Lena Faye. Their daughter was born in 1919. And by 1923, Benjamin had taken a job with Public Service Indiana. And at that time, Public Service was located just down the street here on 2nd Street. So somewhere around 1923, the Shannons moved to Seymour. The Shannons moved into this house that was built somewhere around 1910. It sits behind Kovener's Corner here. But at that time, that house was located here on this corner of 2nd and Emerson Drive. On the lot that sits where the house is today, there was a barn sitting in that location. In 1929, Ben was looking for something else to do, so he had the house that was sitting on this corner moved. They tore down the barn that was sitting behind it, and they moved the house to the lot where the barn was, and they still continued to live there. But then he built on this corner what would become a standard service station, a free pump service station. There was a notice in the paper dated July of 1930 that said that the Ben Shannon's new service station was officially opened. It might seem like an odd location for a service station, but at that time it was actually a very good location, because at the time State Highway 50 didn't go down Tipton Street like it does today. It came into 50 on Tipton Street as it does today, but at that time it turned north on Broadway and then back west onto 2nd Street, went right through the middle of Seymour, continued down 2nd past here, all the way out to the place that's called Hangman's Crossing today. And that was the state highway, so there was a lot of traffic. It was a pretty popular east-west highway across southern Indiana. So especially if you were coming from the west, coming into Seymour, this service station would have been probably the first place you could stop for gas. So I imagine that business was pretty brisk when he opened up in 1930. Now also in 1930 there was a movement with the federal government, and this was across the whole United States, but there was a plan to do major improvements to the whole highway systems all across the U.S. And it didn't come to Seymour until about 5 years later, somewhere around 1935, is when they moved Highway 50 from 2nd Street over to Tipton Street through Seymour. And unfortunately that was not good for business, for Mr. Shannon's business. Now, an interesting note that in March of 1933, Ben Shannon was in his service station here when in the evening a young man came in to the service station with a revolver and was attempted to rob him, but Ben Shannon, who would have been pretty close to 70, probably his late 60s at the time, he grabbed a hammer and actually fought off the attempted robbery. He was injured himself, but he scared the guy enough. He got his revolver out of his hand, and the attempted robber took off running on foot. And that brings us to a fellow named Bill Kovener. William was his official name, but he went by Bill. He was born in 1910 and held various jobs through his life. He worked a great deal for the Farm Bureau Co-op. But after the Highway 50 was moved, the service station started selling sandwiches and drinks and snacks and that sort of thing, trying to make up for lost revenue in the gas sales. And in 1936, Bill Kovener was working at a cheese factory. Now, this cheese factory was located across 2nd Street. There's a little street called Maple Avenue behind the houses over here. And the cheese factory was located over there. And he got so that he would come over for lunch every day and buy sandwiches from the corner grocery store or the gas station. Now, the Shannons, a couple of their children helped out at the station on a regular basis, and her daughter Lena Fay, who generally went by Fay, was helping during those lunch stops, and they got to know, her and Bill got to know each other to the point that in March 15th, 1941, the two of them were married. They actually moved into the house the Shannons lived in. Was right here behind the gas station. Ben had passed away in 1938, or 39, I'm sorry. And so they kept helping run the service station. Ben's wife, Grace, kept it going. See, in 1942, with World War II coming, Bill was drafted into service, and he served it for the U.S. Air Force. He was an aviation mechanic, an airplane mechanic, and was shipped all over the world, actually, and Fay, his wife, went with him during these trips. In 1945, he was discharged, and he moved back to Seymour and moved back in with Grace in the house here behind the service station. Now, business seemed to be declining even more, so in November of 1946 there was an article in the paper that described a Harry King is taking over the running of the service station. I'm sure the Koveners retained ownership of the property, but it said that the name was called King's Standard Service. But he didn't seem to last too long, because 2 months later, in January of 1947, there's an ad describing it as Bob's Standard Service, with a Bob Niederbaumer as the proprietor. But that didn't seem to last real long either, because in June of 1947 the station had closed, and there was an ad that they were selling off the service station equipment. Now, by 1949, Bill and Fay Kovener were looking for a home of their own, and they had thought about tearing down the service station here on the corner and building their new house to live in on this corner. But Fay's brother Otis suggested maybe they should keep it and try opening an ice cream shop, because that was becoming popular at the time. So for earliest ad I could find was June of 1949. There's a notice in the paper that says the Kovener's Corner was open selling their ice cream. And they're famous for their chocolate malt, which is a recipe that Fay came up with on her own, and that's the same recipe that they're still using today. In 1952, the Koveners did buy a new house that was over on Kessler Boulevard, and they continued to run the ice cream shop, and it's actually still in the Kovener family today. It's been run continuously since 1949, and this would be their 75th season of being open, so they've got some exciting plans for things that are going to happen here to celebrate this coming summer. So Grace Shannon died in 1954, Bill Kovener in 2002, and Faye Kovener in 2015. Two brothers, Gary and Rick, are owners now, and it's being ran by Nick and Meredith Kovener still. And living just 2 blocks away, I'm a frequent visitor. As a matter of fact, if I can pull it out here, you get frequent flyer card. Every time you get an ice cream cone, you get a stamp or a punch, and then after 7 ice cream cones, you get a free one. And my personal best was several years ago when I was able to complete 6 of these cards, so I'll have to try for better. An interesting story that Rick Kovener told me that happened in the early 1970s. There was a storm that came through the neighborhood and took out a tree that was right here, and the tree fell and hit the back of the building and sliced off the back eaves of the little building. And when they built it back, they just built it straight down instead of the way it curves today. It curves in the front and curves in the back. But here 4 or 5 years ago, they were redoing the back of the building, and they took the time to put the curve back into the back eave of the building, so it looks back the way it was originally. Kovener's is traditionally open from April the 1st through Labor Day each year, but now they have a ice cream truck that they can set up at different events and festivities, and that allows them to extend their season. They had it at Oktoberfest last year, I remember. So that's the little history of this great little ice cream shop on corner of 2nd and Emerson. They're open 7 days a week and ready to serve you. Thanks for watching. Bye.